Welcome to Purpose After Sports, where we interview athletes to share their post-sport journeys and explore how they are reinventing what it means to compete. Today, we have head volleyball coach with the women's program at Heartland Community College. So happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. The work you're doing is awesome. So just super, super stoked to be here.
Of course. We definitely needed you on. Not only have you done such a tremendous job with that program, but I got the chance to listen to you a couple months ago at this point, speak at an event, and I was just drawn to you immediately. You speak your mind, and
that I do,
but also have so much wisdom to share with athletes, the athlete world. So we are very lucky to have you. I want to get into it right away. Talk to me about your sports journey and your sports career.
Yeah, so I think that your sports journey itself, like it's so different for everybody. And I truly fell into it. I was not raised by parents who were athletes. My brothers didn't play sports. I quite literally tried out for the volleyball team because I didn't have a ride home from school that day. And it was like, all right, cool. Well, I'll just do this until my mom can pick me up.
Yeah.
And then, you just fall into it. I grew up in Naperville, and so there's a ton of sports opportunities there, right? You've got everybody's playing club at a really young age, everybody's specializing really young, and I didn't. And so, I just fell into to me, what was a really ideal beginning of sports, which was, I played them all. I was playing volleyball, I was playing basketball, I was cheerleading, I was track and field, I was doing dance, I was doing everything. I was a manager for the boys basketball team, just like anything, just to find the love and like being a young kid and getting to really just enjoy it, which is what I think it's important at that age.
Yeah.
And so I really just fell into it and immediately fell in love with just the team aspect, the growth aspect. It helped that I was like 5'9" when I was 12. And so, I'm sure every coach was like, oh, we really got something in here. And I was just like, I want to have my hair look cute and have fun and play, But no, it was a great kind of intro because it was just all about enjoyment and fun for the sport.
Yeah. So talk to me about going to college. What was that journey like? Who was helping you make those decisions, things like that?
Yeah. So if you backtrack, so I get to high school and, when you go to a school like Naperville Central, there's 4,000 kids at that school. I walk into camp to start my high school career.
Yeah.
And I cannot express to you how unprepared I was. Every kid there had the Mizuno spandex, Mizuno knee pads, the bag. I mean, they all look the same. And I walk in and I've got a Daytona Beach, Florida shirt on. I've got knee pads on that I'm not even sure if they came from a sporting goods place. They might have been cleaning supply knee pads that my mom was like, yeah, these will work.
This will be fun.
And so, yeah, these are great. I had Sophie shorts on, which I thought it was super cool, but not. No, it doesn't hit. But I walked in and was like, oh, this is a whole new league, right?
Yeah.
Because when I walked into that, I walk in and there are, at the time, you've got people like Jessica Yans, who was committed to Penn State at the time in 2005, 2009, Penn State volleyball. I mean, you're talking big level volleyball.
Yeah.
Girls going to Louisville, West Virginia, Toledo, UNC, Oakland, and all these D1 powerhouses. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know this was what I was walking into, right?
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to have parents who were just like, hey, just go in, work really hard, separate yourself with who you are as a person. And so my journey started there with some really incredible people, but just a really high level volleyball too.
Yeah.
And so that was a really incredible experience because I walked in, I was not the best. I was on the freshman B team. I barely even belonged there.
Yeah.
But the coaches saw something in me and, worked my way up to varsity, all that kind of stuff. But in those 4 years of high school, we were a part of 2 state championship teams, multiple state championships across many different sports that I wasn't a part of, but I'm watching this winning culture, and seeing that. And I mean, Candace Parker was playing basketball there at the time. So it's I'm growing up watching Candace Parker play. If I'm not a winner, what's your legacy, right?
Right.
But I think when you're a young girl and you're seeing that, you start to go okay, this is another level, right? This is going to take another level of commitment. I'm not watching these girls just find winning because winning's easy. I'm watching these girls grind. I'm watching them there for hours and hours and hours and commit and devote themselves. And so from a really young age, I was able to see firsthand, this is what it takes.
Yeah.
This is not handed to you. This didn't just create because somebody just, handed you a skill. This takes work. So in that process, I was really exposed to the recruiting process, the club volleyball side of things, and how to get recruited, and there's a lot of people helping you in that process. But really, I was just kind of looking around and just seeing what people were doing.
Yeah.
Now I was a little bit different. My high school class, we had 8 girls in our senior class, and 7 went Division 1. I know, isn't that wild? When you think about
Oh
that, like
my gosh.
just it's a very high level volleyball. Like I look back and I'm like, man, how did I survive? But 7 girls went Division 1 and I went Division 2. And that was kind of a pinnacle moment in my life that I didn't even realize how big of a deal it was. But now to me, it's such a moment that showed me what my values were in athletics,
Mm.
because I came from a family that, I had D1 offers, I had the D1 visits, but the place that I chose, I went to Lewis University, and the place that I chose, it spoke to me as a human being.
Mm.
And so I instantly made the decision based off of fit,
Yeah.
based off of people, based off of culture, not based off of level, label, trying to be something, just trying to be the fanciest kid with the coolest label of where I was going.
Right.
And so I found my fit, but it didn't necessarily come easy because there was a lot of questions. Because why aren't you going D1? That's what you're doing this all for. And it's like, well, it's about fit. And so I was really proud when I look back in that moment that I'm like, hey, I followed what I believe were my values and didn't even know were core values of who I was.
Yeah. So how did you have that much wisdom at that young of age to be like, how do I get to, see myself as a D2 athlete, which is still an amazing
Yeah.
accomplishment, but be like, I don't want the fancy, shenanigans or all that of the D1, which is great. But how did you have that wisdom?
My parents.
Yeah.
I always have said, now that I can reflect back on my career, one of the greatest gifts that I was given as an athlete is that my parents had no idea what they were doing when it came to sports.
Yeah.
My parents were not athletes. And so I never got in the car after a tournament and talked about stats or talked about performance. They talked to me about how I showcased myself that day. How hard did I work? What kind of teammate was I? What type of leadership skills did I learn that day? What adversity did I get through?
Yeah.
And so from a very young age, my self-worth was not tied to my performance.
That's huge.
My self-worth was tied to the values and traits and how was I living as a human being.
Yeah.
So when we went through the recruiting process, again, I'm going through with my parents are wonderful human beings who are smart people. They're not sports people.
Yeah.
So they're not blinded by the fancy jersey or the cool gym or the label. They want good people. They want a place that their daughter's going to grow. They want a place that they know is a good fit for their daughter.
Right.
And so I think my parents were really integral in that. My mom's now passed away, but at the time, where I went to school was only about 30 minutes from my parents' house. So low key, I think my mom just wanted me close. But the whole culture fit thing, really, she was like, nah, I can just keep her by my side then.
Right.
But I do think it was a huge factor is that my parents really surrounded me by good human beings. And they wanted me to develop as a human being. And sport was just an addition to that.
Yeah.
It wasn't the deciding factor on if I was going to become a good human being or not, and how was I going to develop as a young woman.
I think that is huge, and especially what our sports culture is turning into currently too is it's hard, but you gotta be able to try to read through some of the things that you're going to be told, and like you said, back to what you value, because that you are super important in this process too. Not only what can you give to the program, but what can they provide to you that you're going to come out an even better human. So I think that's huge. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's really big. Did your parents grow up playing sports?
Yes, not on the college level, but they were athletes.
Okay. So yeah, and it's always really different because, now that I have kids and I did play sports and my husband was an athlete, it's really interesting on the other side of how do I instill that piece, because it is different. I'm over here talking I'm like, to my husband, I'm like, our 4-year-old, I'm like, he's got that left-hand whip. I'm like, we should put that ball in his left hand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Mary, this is exactly what you said your parents didn't do.
Right.
So now I think it's the balance of trying to find those two messages and, figure out how to kind of move that path on.
No, 100%. Okay, so we've decided on our university. Talk to me about 4 years of college. What was that journey like?
Oh my gosh. It wasn't all easy, but it was just amazing. You'll never find my name associated with like Hall of Fame records or anything like that. I was a bubble kid my whole experience. I was a starter, I was a non-starter, I was injured, I was healthy, but the Lewis was just, it was a volleyball school, and it is a
Mhm.
volleyball school. And so both in men's and women's volleyball, they're very, very strong in that, which was something that attracted me to the program because I wanted to go be a part of a winning culture
Yeah.
and really volleyball be the mainstay sport. So for us, like we kind of were celebrities on campus on this small school, which was really special. But we won a lot of games, which
Yeah.
was really fun to be a part of. The culture was amazing. I think some of the things that I got out of it that I never really expected were, I played for some of the people that I think have the greatest minds in volleyball.
Mhm.
And so I gained a huge just IQ, like my mind for the game got challenged a lot and
Yeah.
just like the X's and O's of it. I was very prepared for college because high school was really hard.
Mm.
I remember my freshman year preseason, people being like, "This is so hard," and I was like, "This ain't hard at all." I was like, "This is
Okay.
fine. Like physically, I'm good."
Yeah.
I think it was the mental side of things that was tough, and it wasn't necessarily the like. I didn't struggle with too many like mental health crises, but I think the just the navigation of being an 18 to 22-year-old young woman.
Yeah.
You're just going through life. You're figuring out who you are and trying to simultaneously figure that out with also the pressures of being an athlete can be tough.
Mhm.
And so I was lucky enough to be in a place that was really strong foundationally, and so they helped me through that. But I just, when I look back on my 4 years there, I think the things that like when I flash through the images of it, it's just a lot of passion. Like it's
Yeah.
just a lot of passion for the game, passion for the people, the enjoyment and the experiences. It was really just an incredible experience.
Can you talk about, because I got to experience, especially my last 2 years of college, being a part of a winning culture.
Mhm.
What is that take, and what are those locker room talks like? What are those practices like of being part? Because, like you said, it doesn't just happen like to a team to stay consistently good.
Yep.
Like, what are those practices, conversations with your teammates like?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot now as a coach too, because in the recruiting process, you're trying to find people who can be a part of that. But specifically at Lewis, like if we talk about my college experience, you have people who are really, you're sharing a common goal.
Hmm.
And I think that's a huge factor. And so from the beginning, everybody is really on the same page of like what we're trying to accomplish,
Hmm.
is that national championships, that conference championship, like whatever it may be. And so then when you have the little bumps down the road, which happen, especially like, I mean, I tell my team all the time, like, guys, like, I want to say we don't do drama, but like, there's 16, 18-year-olds here right now. Like,
Right.
there's going to be drama, but there's a difference between drama and being dramatic. Like, we just need to learn how to not be dramatic, and then we can handle the drama. Like,
Right.
drama's going to come. And that's how it was when I was in college. It's like you had your little things, we had our hard days, our hard practices where we hated coach or, tough days about playing time. You got pulled and now, you're not getting the role that you want, injuries, off the court stuff. And that's typically what pulls people out of a winning culture.
Right.
That stuff gets so big that then you can't really accomplish what you need to accomplish.
Hmm.
And I think in winning cultures, you can keep that stuff small. That is huge.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you can just go like, hey, like you and I had a hard moment. We get through it and we move on because we care more about this end goal over here than we do about the little thing you and I have going on there.
Exactly.
Losing culture is typically this thing is it takes more weight and it gets bigger because you don't have that common goal to ground you. So it's you don't have that foundation to say like, hey, we're trying to accomplish something really great.
Hmm.
And so then when you get distracted, you don't have enough of a foundation to stand back up on.
Yeah. No, I think that is huge, especially with women's sports. Having a lot of women in one
Mhm.
room, there's gonna be, and it could be about nothing, it could be about everything.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
being able to hone in on what that goal is and sticking with it, I think, huge piece of wisdom.
It's huge. And I think too, like in that you can really have honest conversations about where you're at in that process.
Yeah.
If the winning things, winning's not easy. I mean, at the end of the day, there's one winner every
Yeah.
year, one team that walks away feeling really good. And so it's abnormal. And so as a result, it's a really hard thing to obtain. And then it's a really hard thing to sustain.
Yeah.
But I think too, like when you have that culture and you feel it, it's addicting, it becomes a vice and you want it more. And then you're a little more willing to kind of be present in, you know, your journey. And it doesn't mean it's all good. You
Yeah.
know, I really, my junior year was probably my hardest year. I actually walked away for a little bit, and then came back to the sport. But I think that, again, if you have a strong foundation, you can kind of get through those moments.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, like, so I think that junior year, like, I was just burned out. You
Yeah.
know, you've invested a really long time into your sport, physically and mentally. I was just wiped. I think that my proudest accomplishment, like as an athlete, I mean, it might sound silly, but it's that I was a unanimous captain.
Yeah.
Getting my team to say, like, hey, this is who we want to lead us, even if she's not in a starting role, or if she is in a starting role, this is the person we want leading us.
Yeah.
That to me was such a great gift, but it came with a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, now I'm 21 and things are hard, and that weight's getting to me a little bit, and I'm burned out. You know, am like, I need a break. And so my spring semester of my junior year, I said to my coach, Laura Lee, I said, hey, I was like, I'm done. Like, I can't do this. Like,
Wow.
I think that it's time. I think I need to go find myself outside the sport.
Mm-hmm.
I was finding some other things I felt passionate about. I wanted to explore it. And by just the grace of her own goodwill, she was like, take 2 weeks, like take 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
This is the middle of our spring season. And she's like, go reset.
Yeah.
And I was like, I ain't coming back, you know?
Yeah.
But she was like, you're not, just take 3 weeks. And I was like, okay. So I told the team I was done. I did not tell them about the 3 weeks thing. And I took those 3 weeks, and she was right. I just needed the break. Like, I just needed the break. And it wasn't so much the physical break, but it was the mental reset. And, you know, in that mental reset, I came back with such a different mindset that at the time was maybe a little selfish, but it turned into the best mindset I could have had, because I came back in those 3 weeks. I went with the mindset. So I was like, you know what? Because at the time I just wanted to play, right? I wanted to start. You know, I was a starter, then I lost a spot, then I was a starter again. Now I had consistently lost a spot. And that's hard, right?
Yeah.
And when you're young, that's what everybody wants. They want the playing time. And so that's where my mind was at, is that, like, can I keep doing this work without the external reward, you know? And in that break, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to make Laura Lee's job so hard. I'm going to get every single player to love me so much.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to love playing with me so much. I'm going to push them so much that they're going to be in her office being like, we're better with Mary on the court. Because at that time I realized, like, my God-given skills were only taking me so far, right?
Yeah.
And so where I was really, like, striving and thriving as an athlete was where I was making my teammates better. And so I was like, I'm going to be so good that every single one of these girls are going to walk in there and be like, we need Mary on the court. Put her in the libero jersey, put her on the right side, like, put her wherever, but, like, we're better with her out there.
Yeah.
And so we need her. And so I'm like, I got this great plan. I'm coming back, and, like, I'm the lights out my senior year, you know?
Yeah.
So I come back, but then when I come back, I have this, like, re-energized mindset, right? And so now what I basically am living out is now what is a life motto of mine, and I didn't even realize what I was creating for myself at the moment, but I was lifting others up, right? So now, like, my teammates that were the best in the weight room, I was just dragging them in the weight room. I was right behind them on every rep. I was like, I'm doing one more than you. I'm throwing up more weight than you. I'm running faster than you. Like, don't let me beat you. Because I was like, I'm going to make her better, right?
Yeah.
Every drill, I put myself with somebody that was better than me, and then I challenged them, and I was like, hey, let's get one more. Hey, I'm going to, like, one more. Like, let's not finish here. Let's do one more together.
Yeah.
In film sessions, I sat with people and asked them more questions and dug into them. Off the court, I spent a lot of time with the freshmen. I was, like, just trying to lift them up energy-wise, feel good, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm lifting them all up. And of course, as a result, I rise, you know?
Right.
And so now I'm focused on everybody else. And then the next thing I know, I'm playing the best volleyball I've ever played in my life.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's what, now I have this concept of just, like, lift and you rise, but it's all because I, you know, basically accidentally fell into it that year. And, you know, you realize in that moment, I'm like, I spent my whole life trying to, you know, be so good, perfect this sport, you know, be so solid. And now all of a sudden I've shifted my focus on everybody else. All I care about is pushing them.
Yeah.
And now I'm playing the best volleyball I've ever played.
And I think that mindset also circles back to what you were talking about earlier, that winning culture is when it's not about you necessarily. It might start out, but helping others and bringing other people up is how we all become the best people we can be. So I think that is amazing, and something that I hope young athletes hear and listen, and you can use it in life even now. So, okay, so we are in our senior year of volleyball in college. What's our degree? What's our plan after college? Are we even thinking about it?
Yeah, so my degree is in public relations. I have a minor in psychology. And so at that time, I'm going to go work for nonprofits. I'm going to go change the world. I'm going to work for small agencies that, need help.
Yeah.
My husband and I were dating now at the time. He's a baseball player at Lewis. And so, we want to graduate college and move in together because we're young and in love and all that kind of stuff. But we're young and in love, and we're also broke. And so we moved down here to Central Illinois. He's from here. And so we come down here because cost of living was cheaper. That was truly it.
Yeah.
We are down here, moved into his parents' house. My parents were also going to make us pay rent to live there, and his parents weren't. So, we really got to be smart. So we move into his parents' house, and then 2 days later, he gets a call to go play independent baseball up in Rockford.
Oh, wow.
So now he's leaving.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, there's a plot twist. Like, now I'm living in Central Illinois. I'm not from here. I'm living in my boyfriend's parents' house in his childhood bedroom. I have no job. I'm like, all right, cool. I got this, I think. So I actually got a job working at United Way here in town.
Okay.
And I was doing fundraising for a year for their, annual campaign. And it was fine. I did good work that benefited the community. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the skill set. But it wasn't scratching that itch. I very quickly realized the 9 to 5 was not for me. I thrive in chaos. I thrive in the kind of just unorganized nature that athletics gives you.
Yeah.
And I missed it. And I just wanted it back. And so now I'm down here. And I just happened to shoot Kim Nelson Brown an email. So, Kim at Wesleyan, happened to just shoot her an email and say, hey, Kim, I'm new to town. I've, been here for about 10 months now, working at United Way. Interested in getting it back into coaching. I did coach club my entire college career. And so, I had enjoyed coaching, and it was something that I liked. It was never something I looked at as a career. It was just a hobby. Yeah. To be honest, at that time, it's been a bit now, things have changed, but at that time, there wasn't a lot of light shined on college coaching being a career for women. It wasn't a big discussion. It wasn't a career path that was really kind of brought to my eyes. So I never really thought about it. So I emailed Kim. It's just like, hey, you want to grab coffee? You want to meet? And she's like, yeah, come to my office. I go meet with Kim. We hit it off right away. We hang out for about an hour. And at the end of the conversation, she's like, hey, I literally found out yesterday that we've approved a GA position for the first time ever at Wesleyan for volleyball. And she's like, this was your interview without me telling you that it was your interview. And I was like, Kimberly.
Oh my God.
I know. I was like, I had jeans on. I remember being like, I wouldn't have worn jeans. They were dark jeans, but still. And so, I really fell into it. And so then it was like, well, maybe I do this. This has been my passion my whole life. I love this, and maybe I just see where it takes me, you know? So I decided to leave the United Way job, take the GA position with Kim. I get my master's at ISU in psychology of sport and physical activity. And then I ended up working for Kim for 5 more years before I took the Heartland job.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So describe what it was like learning under Kim and kind of being introduced to coaching on the college level.
Yeah. Oh, Kim was just so perfect for me in so many different ways. The biggest thing is that Kim had, I think, so Kim's legacy of coaching is built on her values. And that to me is one of the things that stands out about her is her character is just, it's the best. And she lives and breathes that every day. Yeah. She's not the kind of person that just says, hey, I believe in X, Y, and Z, and then you never see it, right? She talks about, I believe in developing young, strong women. I believe in her faith. I believe in this being a family. I believe in hard work. I believe in culture. And then she lives it. And so I got to see that on the back end of, and I'm not just talking about how she plans practices or how she runs practice. I'm talking about how that woman treats everybody in that office, how her door is open to every single athlete at Wesleyan, how every administrator and coach is coming to Kim to be like, hey, can I get some help on this?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing Kim in this gray area. You know, the first time I walked through the halls at Wesleyan with Kim, the thing that stood out to me is that every single person waved to Kim and knew her by name.
Mm-hmm.
Every custodial staff, every worker that wasn't like in Shirk Center, like somebody from admissions that happened to be there, every front desk employee that was a student,
Yeah.
Kim knew their name, she knew her name, or they knew her name. That stood out for me. And so having Kim to learn from that was just so incredible. My college coach was younger in her career,
Okay.
so she struggled a little bit more at that time with, you know, some of the really tough conversations you need to have as a coach, the honest part, you know, telling people things that break their hearts sometimes. And I learned the art of that through Kim. You know, she really led with an honesty for greatness mindset where, hey, let's build this trust where I can be honest with you, you can be honest with me. And then learn how to navigate some of those difficult conversations was another massive staple for me with Kim. And then the biggest, I mean, the thing that stands out for the most in my relationship with Kim is 3 years into coaching with Kim, my mom died unexpectedly. And,
wow.
you know, so it's a Friday night, we're playing, you know, Milliken, we lose, the world is over, you know, things are terrible. And like, it's just such a disaster. And the coaching staff's upset with one another and things are heated. And, you know, we go home that night and everybody's running a little bit hot. And just because we're bummed about the loss and we're all taking it heavy.
Yeah.
And then I woke up the next day and, you know, my mom didn't feel great. And that turned into 24 hours of, we thought it was an ear infection. Then it was cardiac. Then she had a heart attack and then she was gone. And so Kim picked me up in that moment in a way that I can't describe. Words don't do it justice.
Yeah.
She valued me as a human being. She took care of me. She gave me space. She then, on the back end, she allowed me the grace to come back and coach and find my competitive edge again in a way that was really organic. And that was just, it's the greatest gift she could have ever given me.
Thank you for sharing that. That is obviously unfortunate, but it truly talks to Kim's character.
Phenomenal.
And, the person and coach that she is.
She's just a wonderful human being. I'm so thankful for my time with her. And it's just, I grew so much. Leaving that program was very difficult.
So talk to me now about making the decision to leave the program. What are our next steps?
Yeah. So at this point, I had my daughter. And so, you know, Matt and I are kind of establishing ourselves in Central Illinois.
So he had come back from
baseball? Matt had been home now. And he played for 3 years and then came home. So he's working, I'm working, we've had our daughter. And then the Heartland thing kind of starts to, you know, get introduced. And totally transparently, I know nothing about junior college at this point. So in Illinois, like north of I-80, the Chicago suburbs, like JUCO isn't looked at the same up there as it is down here.
Yeah.
Up there, it's, you know, like I said, I just described, everybody went Division I. People were hard on me about going Division II, you know, let alone junior college. Like, and so there's a different conception and just like how people are looking at junior college up there. So when I come down here, I get introduced to junior college volleyball pretty quickly because at Wesleyan, we play a lot of those junior colleges during the spring. So we're playing Parkland, Lincoln Land ICC, these really strong name state programs, and they're great. You know, they're really good. And so then the Heartland thing kind of I get wind of it, that they're starting a program. It's getting built from scratch. You know, it's inaugural season. Like, that sounds kind of interesting. Head coaching opportunity in town, which means I don't have to move my family. I don't have to uproot Matt or Chloe. Like, okay, also interesting. At this point now, my dad's moved down here. He wants to be grandpa. And so I'm like, all right, now I'm, you know, my dad can stay with my kid. Like, all this stuff is kind of aligning. But again, I don't know junior college volleyball. Like, do I want this?
Yeah.
Is this something I'm interested in? Like, how do I feel about this? The 2-year thing versus the 4-year thing? What am I getting myself into?
Yeah.
And also, like, am I insane enough to build a program in a hotbed of junior college volleyball? I mean, those 3 programs I just mentioned, Parkland, Lincoln Land, ICC, we're talking about teams that have won multiple national championships. They're at nationals every year. They're known in the country for being so well.
Yeah.
And I'm going to build right in the middle of it. Like, they're each 45 minutes to, like, each direction. Like,
Yeah.
that's a wild pitch, man, you know? And so I go on the interview. You know, I had a lot of conversations with Kim about it. She was my backbone in all of it, of like, you know, what do we think? You know, is this a good move? Should I not? You know, whatever we may be. And I go on the interview, and, you know, it just spoke to me. It just spoke to me. And I think this is where, when you're making value-based decisions in your life, everything else becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
This job spoke to me. This job felt right to me. And the only reason that I was going, maybe I shouldn't take it, is because there were people in my ear going, you want to leave Illinois Wesleyan for a division, like for a junior college, right? Illinois Wesleyan is a Division III powerhouse. Like, we're talking a perennial program, right? That's funded well, that has a wonderful legacy and reputation. And you're going to leave it to go to this no-name junior college that doesn't even have a gym.
Right.
You know, you're going to ruin your career. This is going to be a terrible choice. You're never going to get hired at the right place after this. And I'll tell you what, like, you tell me I can't do something, and then I'm like, I'm in. Yep. So once people started talking, I was like, all you're doing is making me motivated to take this.
Right.
And it was a very difficult decision, because I did love Illinois Wesleyan. I loved working for Kim. I was fine being an assistant. I love being a head coach, but I wasn't somebody who was like, I need to be a head coach, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but it circled back to, like, Mary, it's never been about the label. It's never been about the level. It's never been about anything big, fancy. You want to go, you know, be at the big D1 school. It's always been about fit. And this place fit me, right?
Yeah.
It fit me family-wise. You know, my family could be here. I didn't have to disrupt our life in any way to become a head coach.
Yeah.
It fit me career-wise. I get the opportunity to go be a head coach and start my own program, right? Build it from the ground up. It's going to be me. Good, bad, ugly. It is led by me. That's extremely motivating. And then it fit me personality-wise. And that was the part that I was like, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
Where I coach, I get to make my own, right? Every little piece of swag, piece of confidence, piece of chip on your shoulder, the passion they play with, the work they play with, it's a part of me. And I got to mold that. And I could see that this was a place that I was going to be able to do that at. So those facets were like, this fits you. And then ultimately I was like, I'm going to win here. And I knew I could. And again, people are like, that's going to be really hard. And I was like, I can do it. And so I was really motivated, and I took a leap and said, let's do this. And then we built it.
Okay. So amazing story, but obviously it wasn't that easy. How do you get people to now buy into you after you get the job and get them to come to the school?
It was wild. So you have to think about, too, we're building in 2019 to debut in the fall of 2020.
Okay, yeah.
So we not only are convincing an entire team to come play here, a global pandemic hits, I get pregnant, and of course, like, my son was due in January, and so I'm like, great, I'm finally having a kid out of season. I had my daughter in like late July, and then season gets moved, and so now I'm like, I'm a head coach for the first time. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. I literally do with my second kid. I'm like, this is a hot mess, right? But this is what sports teach you. Like, you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I was like, well, just let's do this. You know, you don't know hard until you're in it. And then you just figure out how to do it. But in the recruiting process, you know, you're selling really two things: a vision and then what's already there. So what's already there, I was very lucky. Like, Heartland was an established junior college in the other sports. Baseball, softball, soccer. We've got a great reputation in the community. All those sports have, you know, like, performed very, very well as sent on a lot of athletes to be successful at the next level. So luckily, there's a foundation of a really strong program here that I was able to build off of. Without that, it would have been very, very difficult. But then the second piece is this vision, right? And so, yes, you have to get people to buy into you, because people are, you know, you're selling them something that doesn't exist, which is really hard. But we're also selling the experience that every single young woman who has come through Heartland in the last 5 years, their name gets etched into something that nobody can take away from them, right? Our first win, you know, our first time going to nationals, our first All-American, our first All-Conference player, our first time upsetting teams, our first ranked win, our first top 10 ranking, all of those things, there's only one first, right? So every single one of those athletes were really motivated by the idea of, like, I get to write a story that nobody can take away from me, right?
So can we talk about the first year, the highs, the lows, what we learned?
Yeah, lots of learning. So the first year, you have, if you think about the calendar year of 2021, we technically had 2 seasons in there because we pushed the COVID year to the spring.
Okay.
So that's our debut season, is the COVID year, which
Mhm.
like I'm such a culture person and now I'm trying to build this culture on Zoom over masks. I'm like, how do you talk about body language and tone when people can't even see you? It was very difficult.
Yeah.
So that was my first challenge, is like, how do you build a culture virtually, you
Mhm.
know? The answer is you don't. You just do your best, you
Right.
know? And so, was lucky enough to kind of find some success there. People establish themselves in relationships. And so that kind of built. And then we only had like 3 months off. And then we have the fall season again. So we basically, yeah, it's just a lot of volleyball thrown in one calendar year.
Yeah.
And so that first year, I mean, when I look back, like that's probably got to be one of the grittiest groups I've ever had, because you're just navigating in the unknown
Mhm.
constantly. Not only the unknown of the pandemic, which is enough for anybody to go through a ton, but also the unknown of like, I'm a first time head coach, right? I'm
Yeah.
figuring it out. And so I think that that was the year that I had to give myself the most grace as a coach.
Mhm.
I both, my son was born January 5th, season started January 10th.
Oh
And
my word.
so, yeah, it's like, my husband and I are passing the kid in the parking lot, and I'm breastfeeding in every practice. Like, it's just a disaster.
Yeah.
But we're thriving. We're finding
Yeah.
our way through it. But I had to really learn to give myself grace, both because of the obvious, hardships for the athletes, for myself as a mother and a coach that year, but also in the sense of like, I learned the lesson very, very quickly that year is being a head coach comes with, there's a cost to leadership, right?
Mhm.
And people misunderstand you.
Yep.
Sometimes you miss on your message. Uh, Sometimes you're questioned, and coaches don't get the platform to explain themselves sometimes, right?
Yep.
People don't buy into your message sometimes. And so I had some misses that year. And I had to be okay with that, because again, if I can fall back on, hey, I'm leading with my values, I'm doing this the right way, then I can still buy into my own vision. And this vision I'm asking all these athletes to buy into, I have to buy into it as well.
Right.
And that first year I questioned it, right? Because I was like, am I in over my head?
Mhm.
This is hard. I've got people who are maybe not getting it. And are they not getting it because I'm wrong? I was wrong on the vision, or I'm not implementing this the right way. But it stayed true to what I believed was best, and it has worked out. But I think in that first year, I really had to just give myself a grace as a human being, to know, like, you don't have to be perfect at this yet.
Yeah.
It'll come with time. But I'm luckily enough to have a great support system, both at home as well as in the office. The coaches that are there are just some of my best friends, but also in my team. Like, when I look on those first couple years, like, yes, it was hard, but some of those young women are people that are family for me now. And I was able to lean on them in that, and that was a really special relationship.
That's awesome. Can we gloat a little bit about the success that you've had being a coach? She's a really great coach and has made a name for herself and for that program. So I'd love for you to tell us some of the big accomplishments, whether it's athlete-wise or team-wise, that you guys have been able to do in the past couple of years.
Sure. The program itself, we did not want to wait 5 to 6 years to just compete with those around us. And so it kind of came in waves every single year. So that first year, you're unranked, you're a nobody, you're an underdog. We knocked off our first top 10 win that year. So we beat the team who was number 3 in the country. Now all of a sudden people start talking about who we are.
Yeah.
That second year, we find our way into like the top 15 in the country, and then we make a trip to nationals. We're seeded 10th, and we finish 7th. And so in the first calendar year of the program, but in the second year of competition, we finished 7th in the nation, which was great. Had our first All-American that year, Carly Bauman, who's actually from Normal West here in town. And so it was really cool to have somebody who was local be our first All-American. That was really special for us.
Yeah.
Then we turn around. Again, we established ourselves as now top 15, then a top 10. And so last year we kind of sat at that top 10 mark, went to nationals, finished right around there. And then this past season, I said, no more top 10. I said, we're done with that. We're going to go top 5. And so that was the whole mission this year, was top 5. Let's see what we can do. We finished 3rd in the nation this year, which was incredible. How the junior college tournament is set up is you actually play out the 3rd place match. So we got to play it out and, dog pile at the end, lift the trophy up and all that jazz. So yeah, we've been lucky enough to basically in 5 years go from literally non-existent to 3rd best in the country.
Which is amazing. I'm sure athletes, coaches will understand, but for anyone else, that's props to you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So with your sports psychology background, can you describe how you use that in being a coach and kind of what you instill in your athletes with that?
Yeah, there's so many things. I think first, if we're talking about, I believe I'm in the business of human beings. And so, your entire mission of purpose after sport and figuring out, how do we use this and all that. I, from a young age, knew my purpose in sport, really my purpose in life is to develop and magnify human beings. That's what I'm here for. That is what I was put on earth to do.
Yeah.
Volleyball just happens to be the avenue and platform that I get to do that in. And so my mission, like my umbrella over all that I do, is that idea. I want to develop young women, magnify their strengths, help them become great so that they can go be great at whatever they want to be, post Heartland or post wherever I'm coaching. So that's really where like the mission of all the sports psychology stuff is derivative in. And I really kind of work to make sure I stay in that foundation. Now, I think that if you're going to look at a group of people as human beings, which I think there's a huge generation of young coaches doing that now. You hear more people talking about this, hey, these are human beings. Let's see them, let's understand them.
Exactly.
You can't just say it, you have to live it, right? And so to say, hey, I see you as a human being also means you have to say, hey, I see your human experience, which means we've got to be okay with the good and the bad. We've got to be okay with them finding success as well as them failing. We've got to be okay with them performing, and we've got to be okay with the days that they're struggling to perform. And then how do we help them get through that?
Right.
You've got to give grace in that process, but you also have to be proactive in that process. So we train, like we do mental trainings once a week, and we take time out of practice to do that. And in that throughout the year, it's kind of based on what each team needs, but we're working on goal orientations, confidence, mental health, just all these different avenues. We're listening to people speak, body image, self-esteem work, just a lot of different things of just trying to teach these aspects versus waiting for something to occur and then say, oh yeah, now let's fix it. We got to get ahead of that experience.
Now, with this becoming gratefully a more talked about subject, do you still have some athletes that have trouble buying into the sports psychology aspect of it? And how do you combat with that?
I don't necessarily think we have people that don't want to buy into it, but I think we have people that don't understand how much work has to go into it.
Okay.
I think there's two, when it comes to the mental training, mental health, sports psychology side of things right now, I think there's two areas that we're missing a little bit as coaches or leaders. One is the actual definition of what we're focusing on. We have to make sure we're defining these things because these are very arbitrary concepts that we're speaking about. And it becomes very gray for a young person to understand.
Right.
For example, there's a key word that's thrown out right now that everybody has, and it's anxiety. Everybody's struggling with anxiety right now. Well, there's different levels of anxiety, right? There are normal levels of anxiety, stress-induced anxiety, performance-induced anxiety, life anxiety, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then there's stress level, crisis level anxiety, right? And getting athletes or young people to understand the differences between those things,
right.
I think is a place that we have to start. Because I do think that if we're just telling everybody, all anxiety is bad anxiety, then we're not teaching them how to handle that. Anxiety is inevitable. All of us are dealing with it. And we're just talking about one example right now, but you have to make sure that your athletes actually understand what is something normal. What is a normal level of anxiety that life gives me? Welcome to being an adult. Life is hard, right? And then how do I handle that?
Right.
And then do I know the difference of when can I handle it and when do I need to seek help? That's the key spot there. I think that we need to make sure we're focusing on. Are we giving athletes the tools to handle some of the mental health crises that come up, and then to know when it's something that they cannot handle?
Right.
Because right now, what we're telling everybody is you can't handle anything.
Mm.
We have to really make sure that we're teaching them you can handle a lot,
You're
but
right.
everybody's threshold as to what they can and cannot handle is different. What you can handle in a certain phase of your life and what I can handle in a certain phase of my life, it's very different
Right.
because we're not the same human beings. We're not starting from the same starting point. And so understanding that like there's all these different levels and nuances to it is like we have to define it. We
Yeah.
have to help create understanding so then we can manage it. Because if it's worth mentioning, then it's manageable, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of teaching to be done in that. And then I think there's this idea of like we need to be proactive with it. We need to get ahead of it versus waiting for things to happen and then being reactive. But to circle back to what you had asked about athletes not buying into it, I don't have any issue with the athletes buying into it. They love the mental training sessions. They love having the conversations. This generation gets a bad rep a lot, and I don't believe in that at all. I think this generation is very empathetic. I think this generation is craving connection. So they buy into this very much. What's difficult for them is to understand how much work this takes, right? Can't be 45 minutes with me every Monday and then you don't think about it again, right? This has to be intentional habits that you're creating on a daily basis. Journaling, expressions of gratitude, visualizations, et cetera, all these different tools. And there's no, like, you have to be doing them as much as you're lifting weights, as much as you're in the gym. And that's the shift right now that I think is hard for athletes to grasp onto.
No, I think that is an amazing point. And like where I think you might have been headed is where they have to put that in life as well. Like, okay, this is something that I am working on with my coach in athletics, but how do I use this when it gets stressful outside of my athlete identity? So I think what you're doing is great with programs and hopefully can build off of, and athletes can get more access to help like that because that is huge. So can we talk about even at the JUCO level and then beyond what kind of transferable skills we are teaching athletes to help them thrive if they want to keep continuing playing or just to be a good human being?
Yeah, I think, you see a lot of different things. And I think there's the obvious things, every athlete that comes out of sports, they're going to have teamwork, leadership, communication skills, ability to handle things under pressure, managing skills, all that kind of stuff. But I think now being out of it for a while, and I'm getting older, but being out of it for a while, so both seeing my own athletes go on as well as my teammates now in different phases of their life, I think, one thing that stands out for me that athletes really have that maybe you don't even realize you have is this idea of adaptability. Your whole life as an athlete, you are conditioned to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
This starts at a very young age. You're a softball player at a U12 tournament. There's a rain delay, and now you've got 3 hours and you're off and you've got to figure out what to do, and then you're playing 3 hours. Changes your whole day, right?
Right.
But when you're 12, you're like, this is awesome. I get to play with my friends. Like, this is great. We're playing in the rain. We're hanging out.
Yeah.
You fast forward to high school, and now you've got volleyball practice, basketball practice, baseball practice, go, go, go. I mean, those athletes are practicing from like 8 to 10 o'clock at night, coming home, doing homework. Again, not a normal schedule. You're becoming comfortable with something that's pretty uncomfortable.
Right.
Then you get to college and you add on pressure of the sport, scheduling, lifts, all this kind of jazz, playing time, at-large bids, rankings. I mean, there's just so much getting thrown at you. And so you become really comfortable with a lot of stimulus coming your way. And then as a result, I think when you get to the professional world, you're much more adaptable than you realize.
Yeah.
I've seen so many of my peers that were athletes, former players, they're now, it's like, throw me a punch, I'll stand right back up. And that's a reality of life. Life is hard, and it's not about waiting for life to get easier. It just continues to stay hard. It's just a reality of it, and you have to navigate through that and then find some joy in that and find the ability to manage that. And I think athletes have this ability to manage that better than people who were not athletes. You have the skill set and the tools to manage chaos. You have the skill set and the tools to manage things not going your way, adversity, obstacles. And now there's a level of just, I can be flexible and adaptable to my environment that I think takes people really far, both professionally and personally. I've seen this completely showcased in my teammates who are now mothers or friends that are now fathers that were athletes. I mean, you want to talk about uncomfortable. Like, be a parent, man. Like, there ain't nothing comfortable with it. You are thrown into this world of, you have no clue what you're doing, and it's chaotic, and you have no schedule and no routine. And I'll tell you what, my former teammates or friends that were athletes, they're handling it like champs.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not easy, but athletes learn how to handle hard better.
No, 100%. I think that's huge because your whole life you're uncomfortable in good and bad. And we got to realize like how you can use it to your advantage because it's not always easier, like you said.
Yeah. I think too, one of the really special things I've seen out of a lot of former athletes is that as an athlete, your whole life, you're passionate about your sport, right?
Yeah.
You do this because you love it. It fills up your cup. It gives you energy. It's something that you can't really define. You can only feel.
Right.
So you grow up having passion and love, and you can close your eyes. I mean, I can close my eyes and still envision, setting a ball or playing a ball or certain like moments in my athletic career. You feel it, right? There's passion there. And when you're then outside of that, you're now a professional and whatever it may be, that avenue for passion is still there. And so athletes are seeking a place to put that energy. And so I think I've seen a lot of athletes find more passion in their life because, yes, your passion was your sport. But now that the sport might be gone in a different way, that passion and that energy is still there. And now it's your job to figure out, how am I going to harness that? And what is that going to go to? So now you see people like yourself, you see people that find a career path that they love, that like it motivates them. There's something intrinsically connected to it.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a gift that sport has given a lot of former athletes.
I shake my head because if I could just bottle that up, that is exactly how it feels like to be an athlete because you can't describe it. It's even hard to describe to another athlete because there's not a word. It's just a feeling that something you love. Like it's an animate object that you just love so much, but like how do we find that in something else, whether it's a passion or helping others or things like that. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's where I think the transition, I mean, this is what you're talking about a lot, is really, the transition after sport. What do we become?
Yeah.
We're no longer athletes. Who are we now? What do we do? And this is where people start to get lost, right?
Yeah.
Because you think that just because you are no longer an athlete, that you've lost all of what we just discussed.
Yeah.
That feeling, that passion, that excitement, now that that's gone. And when you get trapped into those thoughts, it does all go away.
Right.
And now you're really lost. Now you're struggling. We're going to talk about mental health crises. Now you're in the middle of an identity crisis. You don't know who you are anymore. But it's not about, you have no more purpose because the sport is gone. Now it's about the sport is gone. What do you do with that purpose that's still there? How do we find an avenue to bring that back to life? And that's where like athletes got to stand back up in that moment. You stand up and you face that head on, and then you find it. And it's tough, but it's rewarding.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to really thank you for being here. And you're going to make me emotional because I needed that. I needed that years later, and I know someone else will need that. So we appreciate you.
Absolutely. This is great.
Before we end off here, I love asking my people to just share any piece of wisdom that you'd have with a former athlete or something you could tell yourself back in that moment.
I think if I looked back and like, what did I want to hear in that moment, or what would have really done it for me, is this idea of just like, be unafraid, be okay with walking into this fearlessly. So many young athletes stop themselves from being great. And I think the ability to just believe in yourself and be unafraid in moments of unknown is where probably the great things really come alive, and where you have the really ability to be brilliant and brave and beautiful and make your experience something so special. But you have to be relentlessly unafraid to make that happen.
That was beautiful. I think we are going to wrap it up here today. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we can have you on future episodes. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you'd like more stories like this, learning from former athletes, please make sure to subscribe, and we will see you next time.